Why did Peter Jackson hide Gandalf's backstory? Why was Liv Tyler's Arwen nothing like the books? And why did fans of the books hate Hollywood's Gimli? Hi, I'm Dylan, and you're watching Awesome Movies. An angelic start, Gandalf. Gandalf is an OG badass. However, in the films, he's just a little bit less so. And that may be because Hollywood glossed over his past. It's not news that Gandalf isn't human, but he's not just a wizard either. Originally, Tolkien imagined him as a literal angel called Olorin of the West, who was wise and pious. The Gandalf of the books is strongly built and stocky, but short because of his stooped back, with a wide hat and staff. He's also the owner of a crazy set of eyebrows, so long and bushy that they stick out beneath his hat. He's self-possessed, calculating, fearless, intelligent, and a gifted mage. Basically, he was pretty unhuman. And though Jackson's version of the character does come with staff and hat, he's a taller, more mortal-seeming man with doubts and fears. Jackson's portrayal of the wizard makes him physically more imposing, but at the cost of being considerably weaker and plagued by self-doubt and fears. Sure, these changes make Gandalf seem more relatable and a little less intimidating to viewers, but they also result in a screen version that lacks a bit of power and awesomeness. A decisive leader of men, Aragorn. And it's not just the mage that had a makeover. Die-hard fans of the series weren't overly enthusiastic with Jackson's changes to Aragorn, the heir to the throne of Gondor. In the books, Gandalf calls Aragorn the greatest huntsman and traveler of his age. He's lean and dark-haired with shaggy gray strands in his dew and is always dressed in gray and brown for camouflage. He's also supposed to have piercing gray eyes and cut a truly imposing figure at 6 foot 6 inches. And he doesn't just look like a king, he acts the part too. In the literature, Aragorn was raised by the elf Elrond, so he is graceful and intelligent like the rest of his elven posse. He's also 100% driven to destroy the ring, retake the throne of Gondor, and bring peace to his people. Tolkien gifted this character with a will so strong and determined that even Sauron was afraid of him. So when Hollywood gave us a blue-eyed man dressed in black, standing just 6 feet tall and riddled with angst, fans were disappointed. While Viggo Mortenson was definitely a great choice for the role, the Aragorn that Jackson unleashed on the world was a loner, filled with self-doubt and unsure which path to take. Minus his elven posse and direction, it's not surprising that many fans preferred the book version of this character. Not in the running to be our BFF, Boromir. Like Aragorn, the Boromir of the books was dark-haired with hair falling to his shoulders. He was gray-eyed and proud, with a stern glance. But on screen, he became a blonde to distinguish him from the heir of Gondor. Boromir was described in the books as arrogant and proud, but he was also smart, pragmatic, determined, and skeptical, with a healthy mistrust of both Gandalf and the elves. In fact, the books describe him as someone about whom all spoke his praise and who would make a worthy captain when his time came. But apart from that, we know little else of the appearance of Book Boromir, with some fans calling him the least developed of all Tolkien's characters. As a result, Jackson's representation of Boromir was really for the better. The film actually made Boromir more likable than in the source literature. Sure, he wasn't evil in the books, nor did he go down fighting the orcs to save Merry and Pippin. That moving death was all thanks to Jackson. A little bit lacking. Legolas. For Tolkien, Legolas was a strange, fair-faced elf in green and brown clothes and lace-up boots, and strangely, that's where the descriptions stop. The author has always been vocal that the elves of Middle-earth were his favorite creation, yet he gives us almost zero information about Legolas, including a backstory. The elf just appears at the Council of Elrond as a messenger and joins the Fellowship. But Legolas's portrayal in the films was highly criticized, not because Orlando Bloom didn't look the part, but because the film version depicted the elf, who's a total Aragorn fangirl in the books, as a more likable but broodier character. In the books, poor Legolas tries to give the Fellowship long history lessons and lectures which they ignore and frequently bursts into song. He's also a total optimist who's endlessly cheerful, quite unlike the sultry, show-offy hotshot we see on screen. In contrast, Hollywood's Legolas is soft-spoken and a keen observer, whose optimism is replaced with thoughtfulness. Giggles versus glory, Gimli. Gimli's described as stout, with brown hair and beard and an ever-present helmet. He's also an impressive warrior, skilled in battle and seriously dedicated to destroying the ring. But when Peter Jackson was done with him, Gimli had morphed into red-headed comic relief. Not only is he constantly made to seem silly and clumsy, but he's behind witty banter that was totally absent in the books. And while the jokes at Gimli's expense are meant to relieve some of the heavy tension in the films, they make it difficult for viewers not to see the dwarf as a joke. His history of masterful battles are usurped for cheap laughs. Understandably, some fans were seriously unimpressed with his portrayal in the films. But at the same time, filmgoers who hadn't read the book actually loved him, as his jokes and humor added a fun layer to an otherwise serious film.
Nobody tosses a dwarf!
After all, it's pretty hard to keep a straight face when a dwarf is threatened with dwarf tossing. More than just a pretty face, Arwen. Throughout the entirety of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, Book Arwen actually only features twice, once as a silent but beautiful presence during the Council of Elrond, and again at the end of the series when she marries Aragorn. Not only that, but she only has a single line of dialogue, and it isn't even to Aragorn. To bump up Arwen's part, Jackson had her fulfill the role of another character from the books, the elf Glorfindel, who guided Frodo across the river. So the director made Arwen more than just a pretty face in the background. Instead, she's an elven warrior and true badass worthy of Aragorn's adoration. Despite changing her role in the film, the director remained true to Tolkien's vision of Arwen, who is described as having dark hair, bright eyes, smooth, flawless pale skin, and a stately presence. So not only did the change bring a female character to a mainly male cast, but it gave her a greater purpose. In linking her fate to that of the ring, we're extra motivated to see the ring destroyed. After all, no one wants to see a dead elf. Age over wisdom. Frodo. When Frodo leaves the Shire to destroy the ring, he's a wealthy 50-year-old with oodles of wisdom and experience. Gandalf describes the Hobbit as a stout fellow with red cheeks, taller than some, and fairer than most. He also has a cleft chin, bright eyes, and a great love of poetry, while being smart, determined, and crafty. In fact, Sam calls Frodo almost wizard-like because of his prophetic-like wisdom. Enter Peter Jackson, and the Frodo we thought we knew evolved into a skinny, young, dark-haired hobbit with a questionable backbone who's easily influenced by the ring. Though Elijah Wood played the part with gusto, he was only 18 at the time, and his youth makes the character seem naive and a little childish. This also paves the way for the biggest deviation from the literature, Frodo trusting Gollum over Sam. In the words of some unimpressed fans, Peter Jackson turned Frodo into a damsel in distress. Thankfully, this is remedied by the Fellowship, who have his back no matter what. The world's greatest cheerleader, Samwise. Without Sam, the Fellowship would have failed miserably. Not only is he the best cheerleader and sidekick that anyone could ask for, but he's got the personality to match. Tolkien described him as shorter and rounder than other hobbits, with a mop of curly brown hair and rough hands. So visually, Jackson's Sam is on point. Sean Astin looked every bit the Hobbit, even if he didn't have dark hair. But where Jackson dropped the ball with Sam was through his relationship with Frodo. On screen, we saw Frodo lashing out at Sam so that he almost considered abandoning Frodo on the stairs. Tolkien's Sam would never, and I mean never, abandon Frodo. But he also wouldn't have a reason to if Jackson hadn't added that little bit of intrigue. When obsession takes over, Gollum. Tolkien imagined Gollum as truly hideous and absolutely corrupted by evil, so Jackson and Andy Serkis did a stellar job bringing this to the screen. They nailed what Gollum was supposed to look like, in what's considered as hands down the best representation of a Tolkien character. In the books, Gollum is a pale, menacing creature with huge lamp-like eyes and straggly, dark hair. His limbs are super thin and pale, and he has a stomach-turning habit of clearing his throat in the most revolting way, earning him his nickname.
Where would you be without me? Ellen, I saved us.
Not only was Jackson faithful to this description, but he improved it. With CGI and editing, Gollum's inner turmoil was portrayed with way more detail than in the books. No wonder Andy Serkis took the world by storm with his performance. Two are better than one, Merry and Pippin. Jackson's representation of our favorite troublemakers isn't far off from the books. These two aren't exactly wise or self-sufficient, but that's because they're part of the Shire's gentry. You know, they're spoiled rich kids, so of course they know nothing about hard work or secret missions to save the world. Unlike in the film, where they remain cheeky tricksters, Tolkien described these hobbits as becoming helpful companions. In fact, Merry even helps our girl Éowyn to slay the Witch King. Jackson gave Merry and Pippin a comic makeover, focusing less on their wit and more on their goofiness. And to add insult to injury, they didn't even look the part. Merry's supposed to be taller than the other hobbits, almost 4 feet, but on screen they're all equally small. Also, Pippin is supposed to have beautiful golden curls and not the mousy brown locks sported by Billy Boyd. But let's be honest, that doesn't stop us from loving these two, right? Hobbits for the win! Which character's transformation for the screen did you think was the most surprising? Let us know in the comments. And until next time, stay awesome!